And Julian Leeser resigning from his portfolios on the Liberal front bench. We'll get some reaction now. Former Liberal MP Fiona Scott and former Labor advisor now with Council House Andrew Porter. Great to see you both. Fiona, how damaging is this to the Liberal Party response to The Voice?
Yeah, good afternoon, Kieran. Look, I don't think it's helpful. I think in many ways it's untidy. I would have thought one of the better solutions here was if the party room was given a free vote as a matter of conscience, which allowed various executive, members of shadow cabinet to have their view and to campaign the way they'd like to campaign. And so I think that's untidy, and I'm sure Julian Leeser is not necessarily the only one that feels this way. I mean, one of the things about The Voice, sure, I support it in principle, but when I talk to my local Aboriginal elders, they have issues here in Western Sydney about it, which is a unique dynamic, which is unique to the Darug people here in Western Sydney. So I think there's an element here with this, whilst even Peter Dutton has issues with the language, but if it was more a localised regional voice as opposed to a Canberra voice, then the dynamic changes. So I think in some ways it's very disappointing. It's good that Julian Leeser is still loyal to Peter Dutton, he's still loyal to the Liberal Party and all of those sorts of things. But as we go towards the referendum, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people whose views will change either for or against in the coming few months.
Andrew, should the government now be trying to reach out and use this as a positive to try and reach out to the likes of Ken Wyatt, Julian Leeser and other Liberals backing it, as opposed to putting the boot into Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party?
Well, it's a really good question, Kieran. I think we've seen the answer to that already from the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, sort of welcoming Julian Leeser, voicing his position on the Indigenous voice to Parliament. What the Liberal Party fundamentally need, though, is more Fiona Scotts, more Roshena Campbells. You've got a party room where the thinking people in the room are the Julian Leesers of the world, and we now know what they're thinking. If it's a broad church, it's a church with a leaky roof, there's mildew on the carpet, there's mould on the walls, and the pews are empty. And this is just too important for it to be a political issue. You're entirely right, I think, Kieran, that it's really now a question of those people of goodwill being able to work together. And obviously Julian Leeser, I think to an extent counts himself as one. The only problem with a lot of the sort of remaining Liberal position on this, Kieran, is that we're simultaneously told that this is a sort of Schrodinger's voice. It's going to somehow set interest rates, but it's not going to do anything. So sort of taking a position that, well, we'll have local voices first. The Liberal Party actually needs to decide whether it's a vote of its broader membership, whether it's a vote of the party or the shadow cabinet. Which one is it going to be? Is it going to sort of take people's backyards off them? Is it going to set interest rates, or is it just a Canberra voice of elites that's doing nothing? They don't have a position. They need to sort that out, and then they need to sort of figure out whether or not they want to reach out to the government or not.
Fiona, do you believe that a position like this from Leeser, he said it was made on principle without rancour to his colleagues, he tried to convince them, he failed, but do you think this gives Liberal and coalition voters cover if they want to support The Voice? I don't think it'd be a majority, but if some do, does it give them covered to do that and therefore help boost the chances of The Voice succeeding?
Yeah, look, Kieran, it's an interesting question, and there are a range of Liberals that have different views here. For instance, Andrew Bragg's view, Bridget Archer's view, even Jenny Ware's view. So there are other views out there about this voice. And I mean, my view, as I said previously, is informed by talking with the elders of the Aboriginal nation in which I live, which is the Darug elders, and that they're not comfortable with the current use of words because they don't believe they will have a voice because of native title issues within the state of New South Wales, and potentially a treaty should go first. Now, that doesn't mean they're against it. There's just more work here to be done. And I think that's the challenge here when it becomes so divisive, that the concept of it, great, but I don't believe that the Labor Party are at the end here as to the work that needs to be done that is going to benefit Aboriginal people, Indigenous people overall, or is going to actually meet the full needs of people. And secondly, that it is going to be an appropriate amendment to our Constitution. And these are huge issues to deal with. And I think it's disappointing when we get into a space of of this sort of political argy-bargy. Of course, it's inevitable. I'm not naive about that. But the last thing we want to do on the journey of reconciliation is go backwards and divide our nation. And I think that's a really delicate balance here as to how we play this. And I think Julian Leeser's words today, he did try to navigate that tightrope in many ways, but has just felt the mechanism of shadow cabinet being tied has not afforded him the ability to continue to exercise his view as an educated man. And I think under Liberal Party convention, this could have all been avoided if we just used our convention, which is unique to the Liberal Party. It's not something the Labor Party has the ability to do, and that's allow a vote of conscience and conscience amongst all of our members, including those in shadow cabinet.
Andrew, there's a lot at stake, as Fiona said there, not just for the political prospects of Prime Minister Albanese and Opposition Leader Dutton, but for the issue of reconciliation itself.
Well, I think that's right, Kieran, and completely agree with Fiona's point that these things are bigger than politics. But it still remains the case that the internal machinations of the Liberal Party are really going to be key to whether this succeeds and whether the debate can be conducted responsibly. There's an extent to which Julian Leeser's really, quite interesting move today might put pressure on other Liberal moderates, particularly within the shadow cabinet. It may be a question of, the last Liberal moderate with any particular sort of integrity turning out the lights, but it's so incredibly important for them to arrive at a position that allows the debate to be conducted in a manner and form that is civil, that really actually tackles some of the issues that Fiona was speaking to as well. I think it's also really important to acknowledge, Kieran, that you can do both. You can meaningfully invest in closing the gap throughout the country, not just one geography, one TO group, and the like. You can actually have this recognition and do other things as well. It's not one or the other. These things aren't mutually exclusive, and not for a moment suggesting that that's what Fiona's advancing, but that has sort of come up a bit in the debate in recent weeks. Sure. The reality is we need to do a lot more on both and be civil about that discussion.